What's up guys, welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. Now as we did last time with the previous BGS return, what I'm going to do in this video is first show you the cards that I'm sending raw and go over them in detail, look at all the defects they have and give a prediction for what I expect them to grade. And then we're going to cut out to when the cards actually come back from BGS and see how they did and how that compared to what I was expecting. So this is an express return over 5 days it used to be called, which costs $150 per card, so it's pretty expensive. And I'm only sending 3 cards, but they're all pretty big cards. So without further ado, let's get right into the preview. Alright, so first up we have my Ghost Rare First Edition Stardust Dragon. This is probably the biggest card in the whole submission because as a gem, this card is worth easily like 10k plus. And even as a 9, I think the recent sales are around 5, maybe even a bit more, $1,000. So it's a huge card. I actually submitted this card before and got it back in a previous return, and it got an 8.5. And I was a bit disappointed with that grade, to be honest, especially because it got an 8.5 on surface, which I really felt was undeserved. So yeah, looking at the card in more detail, the centering is really good, definitely a 9.5. Not actually that far away from even being able to get a 10 on centering, but it's always hard to predict what's going to get a 10 and what's going to get a 9.5 from centering from BGS. So I'll just say a 9.5 to play it safe. The front surface is incredibly nice for a Ghost Rare. You can probably see the scratching on this card is just about 0 on the foil, maybe the tiniest bit, but overall it's about as clean as you'll get on a Ghost Rare. So I don't know what caused it to get an 8.5 on surface last time, but I definitely don't think it was the foil. So pretty much the front overall is good enough for a gem, but if we flick it over to the back, it does have a few issues on the back. So the surface is again very clean, and I really do think the surface overall can get a 9.5. But if we look at the edges and corners, this is a Europrint Stardust Dragon, and Europrint cards always have slight issues with the cutting on the edges and corners, pretty much from any era, but 5Ds is no exception. So if you look down at the bottom, there's a little bit of whitening. This corner is pretty much clear, and there's a little bit of whitening up in the top left as well. So corners I'm probably expecting a 9 from, but maybe even from a harsh grade they could get an 8.5. That is what it got last time. And the edges do have, again, some whitening. I think most of it is up here at the top on the back. But there's also a few other little dots scattered around the edges. So the edges, again, I think most likely are a 9. And they're a little better than the corners, so I wouldn't expect those to get an 8.5. So overall, my expectation for this card is a BGS 9. Centering and surface have a pretty solid chance to get 9.5s. And if we got 9s on the other 2 subs, it would end up as a quad plus 9, which would be awesome. And honestly, the edges may even squeak a 9.5 from a nice grader, so there is some chance for a gem, but my expectation for the card is just a 9 with possibly an 8.5 on corners. Alright, next up we have a Cyber End Dragon First Edition Ultimate Rare from Cybernetic Revolution. This one is a North American print, which you can see by the fact that the foil doesn't really have much pattern to it. If I put a European print side by side, you'd see a huge difference there. The card's in pretty good shape overall. The centering is probably the best aspect of the card. It's a little bit off left to right, just a tiny bit, but I'd say it's probably still within the 9.5 centering range and certainly at least a 9. The front surface is actually very clean as well. I'd say good enough for a 9.5 most days. There's pretty much no scratching on it. The corners are nice in terms of whitening. There's not really any whitening on the corners. But if I just go to the bottom left, there's a tiny bit of softness to the bottom left corner. It's not bent or anything like that, but it's slightly soft. So that could knock the corners to a 9 or an 8.5 depending on the grader. So yeah, as far as the front is concerned, this is pretty much a solid 9. Edges, I'd also expect a 9 from because of that little bit of white on the left. Now if I flip this card over to the back, the surface is again very nice and clean. Pretty much nothing wrong with it there. So overall, the card's surface I think should be able to get a 9.5. The centering is again solid like the front, although the back centering never matters as much with Beckett anyway. The corners are clean as they were on the front for the most part, but if we go to this bottom right back corner, you can see it's got a decent amount of whitening on it, kind of like a little nick, but under the light there isn't any kind of bend there. It is just there's just a bit of white on the corner, so that will affect the corner grade unfortunately quite a lot. I'd say I probably expect an 8 on corners for this card, but depending on the grader, we could definitely get that 8.5 as well. And the edges on the back are clean, so that won't knock the edges any lower than the 9 we were expecting. So overall, this card has a chance for a 9 as long as the corners get an 8.5. But my personal prediction will be an overall 8.5 because of that 8 on corners. Alright, and the final card is my wavy faded first edition LOB Monster Reborn. So this is a card I've had for many years. I think I bought it back in 2017. And I've tried grading it a couple of times in the past already, and both times it got an 8.5. And I'll go over the reason for that in a bit. So if you're looking at the front, the centering is pretty solid. It's a little bit tilted anti-clockwise. So you can see that the left border, for example, starts off thicker and then ends thinner, while the right border is thicker at the top and thinner at the bottom. So that does affect the centering grade somewhat, even though in the middle the card is pretty much perfectly centered. So I'd say depending on the grader, you could get either either a 9 on centering or a 9.5. The front is very, very clean overall. There's really no kind of wear, no kind of scratching on the foil or anything like that. The edges are clean, corners are clean, but the problem with the card, which is visible from both sides, is actually the cut. So ideally a card will have 4 evenly shaped corners that are nicely rounded. This card has 2 corners which are fairly good, the top left and the bottom right. But the bottom left corner is a little bit of a funny shape. It kind of comes up and then it's a very sharp cut on the corner. And the top right is the real problem with the card. It has a very unusual cut for a Yu-Gi-Oh card. It's the kind of thing where you might almost think it was trimmed if you didn't know what you were looking at. But actually with wavy print LOB cards, you do get a lot of issues like this with the factory cut. So the edge kind of comes down a little bit early, and then it's not quite a square corner, but it's definitely a very sharp cut again for the corner. Moving on to the back, again the centering is about the same as the front, so either a 9 or a 9.5. Edges are very nice and clean. I'd say most likely they should be able to get a 9.5, maybe from a very harsh grader a 9, but I do think they deserve a 9.5. The surface of the card is nice and clean. There's a couple of very light scratches on it, but they're only really very light. Again, I bring it, you can see the vertical scratches now when I put the light up and down. So again, some very, very light scratching, but nothing that'll affect the grade much. One of the times I subbed this card, it got an 8.5 on surface, but I think that was actually just because of the front being faded, because as far as the actual surface condition is concerned, it's easily a 9, if not a 9.5. But then again, if we look at the corners, 3 of them are pretty much okay on the back. That one's a little bit unusual, but that top corner from the front looks pretty bad on the back as well. So again, you can see it's not completely square, but it definitely has an unusual shape to it. And the way it comes out onto that edge as well is not how it's meant to be. So that will definitely affect the grade. I think if we get lucky, it could get a 9 on corners, and in that case it could actually get a 9.5 overall from the right grader. If we get unlucky, it could probably get anything down to an 8 on corners, which is what it got last time. And in that case the card couldn't get higher than an 8.5 overall. But I'm going to put my prediction right in the middle and say that I expect a 9 from it, with an 8.5 on corners, and then probably 1 or 2 9.5 condition subgrades as well. So that does it for the preview video, and now we're going to jump right into the returns and see how all these cards actually graded. Alright, so the cards have been sent off to Beckett. It took about 3 weeks for the grades to come back, which was a little bit longer than I expected, but they are back now, and we're ready to look over them. So first up, we'll go over the Stardust Dragon. My prediction for this was a BGS 8.5 overall, probably just because of that poor corner grade that I was expecting with that back corner wear. And the grade we got was exactly that, so we got a BGS 8.5, very strong subgrades overall, 9, 9.5, and 9.5. But then that 8 on corners because of that whitening on the back. But what I have noticed just immediately when I got this card back is that there's now some edge wear at the top on the back. And I'm pretty confident that's from Beckett, unfortunately, because when I looked this card over before, and you can see in the first part of this video as well, it had some edge wear on the front, but not on the back. So that's always disappointing to see. In this case, I don't think it changed the grades or even the subgrades, so it doesn't make a huge difference, especially because I'm going to be selling the card anyway. But it is disappointing to see how these grading companies handle cards. And next up, we'll go over the Monster Reborn. So this one, I said off a couple of times before, as I said, it got an 8.5 every time overall, with different subgrades each time. So it's a bit of a wild card. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was definitely hoping for a 9 overall, and we managed to get that mint 9. So I'm pretty happy with this, to be honest. It does have that 8.5 on corners, and then 9.5, 9.5, 9. To be honest, I'm not sure why the surface is a 9 rather than a 9.5. I think it's probably just because of the fade, because the card is quite faded. But overall, I'm very happy with it. This one didn't get any kind of damage up there. So this is definitely one to keep in the collection, and I'm glad to at least have it finally graded as a mint 9 rather than a near mint 8.5. And finally, getting on to the biggest card in the submission, the Ghost Rare Stardust Dragon. This again was a resub. It got an 8.5 the first time. I thought it was really worthy of a 9. We've looked over it already, but yeah, beautiful clean card. And the grade it got was a mint 9, so this was really good. Very happy to have this as it is. It did get an 8.5 corners, but at the same time it got the 9.5 surface, which even a lot of gem mint Stardust Dragons from BGS, still you see that 9 surface on there. And surface is definitely the most important subgrade with the Ghost Rare in terms of what collectors value. So I'm really happy to have that. I do think it's deserved. The card is very, very clean as far as surface is concerned. It's just those European issues on the back edges and corners to do with how they're cut that it's not a gem overall. But that's totally fine by me. Very happy with the mint 9 grade and the subgrades it got. So yeah, overall, honestly, I'd say a good return. Nothing spectacular, like nothing did better than I was expecting as such. But nothing did worse either. And so I definitely can't complain with how it went. I've been pretty happy with all of my BGS Express and Premium submissions recently. The only thing that's slightly disappointing in the submission was that edge nick on the back of the Cyber Dragon. It's very lucky that it was on that card rather than these two, because the other cards were cards from my collection, whereas the Cyber Dragon is just a card that I was probably going to sell anyway. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if your predictions matched up with the grades as well, or if you think I missed something on some of the cards, whatever it might be. And yeah, until next time, this is Schlost signing out.